Hello everybody, welcome back to Waffles RC. We are back building another RC because you can never have too many. And I've had this idea in my head, so figured might as well try it. So the goal for this RC is to make it look like that, but heavily modified because I can. That's expensive to heavily modify, whereas an RC is a little bit cheaper. A little bit. Not a lot. And for this one, as you can see, we have cleaned and organized the workbench. Ignore that part. That's storage. But where we actually work is all nice and clean. So let's get started unboxing the body, and then I'll tell you the ideas that I have for this particular RC. All right, so here is the new body. I know, it's gorgeous, isn't it? So in here is the Element Trail Runner body. Going to have our lovely Anna paint it to look like the big truck. So we have the body is in here, all the accessories that come with it. It's just the body kit, it's clear. This is what we're going to use for the body because we want it to look like a 4Runner. And in this box is the axles. They're some more Amazon special. I believe they are AR45-ish axles. They're portal axles, as you can see, got little portals. So this is the rear one. This one's going to stay exactly how it is. Now this is the front. So the reason why I went with these particular axles is because right here is a bolt on either side, which allows basically to disassemble this entire axle assembly, so you can take the tubes out and you have the center differential right here. So the reason why I want to be able to take the axle tubes out of this is because I'm going to try, and the key word there is try, to make my own independent front suspension for this particular RC. Now before you say anything, I know that there is an IFS kit that they sell. I looked at it. It is for this particular RC body that I got, the Element Trail Runner. And it's just a bolt-in. It's a whole new assembly. It has the steering, axle shafts, shocks, the front part of the frame rail. I know it has all that, and I know it's not very expensive. But come on, you know me. I'm gonna make it. And I'm going to make it out of metal because, well, why not? That's why I want these to come apart, because I want the center differential here sitting inside of a carriage that I'm going to make, the center diff area where the upper and lower control arms will connect to. The hard part about this is going to be not the control arms. I think that's going to be easy. It's axle shafts, because this is not designed to have axle shafts that move up and down, and they have to be able to expand and compress. That's where it's going to get tricky. So why didn't I go the easy way, other than the fact that I just want to build it? I wanted portals. That IFS kit is basically a straight axle. I don't want straight axle, I want portals. By wanting portals, I have to get creative. Let's take this out of the bag, take it apart, and see what we're working with. Now, some of you also may be wondering, why am I starting a new project when I have 5 out of my collection that need to be repaired? Well, the reason is I'm waiting on parts. I've diagnosed them, I know what's wrong with them, so I'm just waiting for parts to show up, or just time, mainly because trying to film just maintenance, I've done one of those videos, did not do very well. And it's all going to be really quick. It would come out to be like a 4-minute video after editing. So I have the parts to get this one started, and I want to make sure that I can actually do it, because that's going to be the hardest part of this whole thing, is making sure that I can get this axle to work with my independent front suspension idea. That's why we are now working on this one rather than doing the maintenance on the other ones. I'll be doing them off camera. Okay, so here's the axle. So I've taken the screws out and just take that out. Take that out. And now we have the center section for the differential. Admittedly, the hardest part is going to be finding some way to get axle shafts to stay in here, because I want to reuse these portals. I have to be able to get an axle shaft to stay in here while somehow utilizing this style axle shaft that can also go into this portal. That's going to be the tricky part. But for now, we have this. This right here is why I went with these particular axles. Price-wise, it was good. Not a fan of the color, but it's going to be under an RC. Not concerned. I wanted this one just so I could have this section, and then I can figure out how to get axle shafts to stay in it. Most likely it's going to wind up being JB Weld, honestly. And drilling out these axle shafts to be able to put a set screw through it to mount axle shaft onto it, so that way it can compress and decompress as the suspension travels. Now we have this, and we have these. Take the portals off, then we'll get some metal out, start cutting, make a little housing for this piece, and start working on some control arms. Got the body out, somewhat reminiscent of a 4Runner. It's close enough for me. So I have the diff about in the middle, then a bunch of links that I now have to figure out. The cage for this thing, mounts on the cage for these, and then basically a knuckle for the portal to mount to and the control arms to mount to. So the way I'm doing this, once again, this is all experimenting. I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm certainly going to try. So I'm basically going to make A-arms, something like that, but I need 2 A-arms on either side, and I want it to have quite a lot of travel, because in the Toyota world, you want long travel. So this is going to have long travel, hopefully. This is the basic principle that I'm going off of right now. Eventually, I'll probably weld some metal onto these just to strengthen them up, as long as they pivot, and it also needs a spot for the coilover to mount onto as well. Okay, some time has passed. My workbench is a mess, but it is what it is. So this is where I'm at so far. Have the center diff in there. It's only held on by 2 screws. I'm just, once again, making sure that this whole theory works. I can probably trim this up, make it a little bit shorter, or just use it as a skid plate, which is probably what I'll do. There's enough room to be able to get the screw in for the drive shaft. Still have to figure out axle shafts and how I'm going to go about doing that, but that's for future me. And so future me has a heck of a problem in front of him, but I'm sure he'll figure it out. So I only got 2 screws holding this thing in. It's pretty sturdy in there, but I'm going to put some more, probably make some more braces for it. So now I'm going to drill holes in here and mount my control arms onto it, and then figure out a knuckle for the portals. Here it is with all the links. They all move, and as you can see, I did make it so that the center section can be removed, because with what I'm going to have to do for axle shafts on this thing, if I break that, I need to be able to replace it, which means I don't want to have to cut the whole RC apart just to get that thing out. So when I do the other screws to brace it up in here, make it a little bit stronger, not move as much, I'm going to make sure that that can still come out and go back in. The way that it comes out is, this is the bottom, in case you didn't know, which you didn't because I didn't tell you till just now. This is the bottom, so it comes out. I can't do it one-handed, so trust me, you saw it in there, it came out. So now the part I'm not looking forward to is the whole knuckle situation. I gotta figure out the portal to make a knuckle that all these links can connect to, and that this portal can connect to as well, and still be able to turn. I'm going to attempt to try and figure that out, and I'll let you know or you'll see in just a second what I came up with. Okay, you can see by the mess that I've been working quite a bit. So after 1, 2, 3 failed iterations of trying to make a knuckle or something that would work as one, I finally came up with this. So you're looking at it from the front. That's the next issue that I got to work out, is the steering. But once again, future problem. I'll figure that out. I have to move those, or I don't know. But as you can see, it's still a bit stiff, but you get the idea. It moves. Still have quite a bit of work to do to this. It's very floppy, but that's because I have independent arms for each arm. I'm gonna weld stuff in between here to make it a solid arm, and then I can make adjustments off of those. I just thought of a much easier way of doing this. Dang it. Well, at least you guys helped me. I'm gonna go try something. So even after doing probably 7 different ways of trying to get this stuff to work, good lesson to be learned here is to not let it defeat you. I've tried, like I said, probably about 7 different ways on how to get this to work correctly. Don't let it deject you from continuing to try and try, even though it seems like it's not going to work out correctly. Eventually you'll come up with the right idea and it will work. So I'm not immune to that. I was starting to get dejected until I came up with this new idea, and now it works. So now I'm happy. I'm freezing because apparently we're back in winter again. And yeah, it does take time. I've been out here for about 6 hours just trying to do these links. So I'll show you what I came up with. So like I said, this whole idea wasn't working with making the knuckle. Couldn't get the steering to work correctly, and there was just too much stuff in the way. So this is what I came up with. Luckily, I've a bucket of links. So I took 2 of these, bent a couple of them, turned it into an A-arm essentially, and now everything goes up and down just like I wanted. And most importantly, I now have full range of steering, lots of clearance for the axle shaft, so I can make my own axle shaft. And now I'll have some more room for the coilover, because this was getting a little tight to try and get the coilover in there. And you can see right there how close this axle shaft is, let alone a bigger one that I'm going to have to run. Remember, just keep plugging away at it, and you'll figure out something that works. It also certainly doesn't hurt to always have lots of extra parts. When you're customizing these things, don't throw stuff away. I don't throw these links away when I don't use them, so that's how I was able to come up with this. And there we are. There is my homemade independent front suspension. Have the diff carrier, upper control arms, lower control arms, and everything works exactly how I wanted it to. So now just have to figure out, well, everything, but I have to figure out steering, axle shafts, and the coilovers. I found these angled rod ends, and I apparently only had 3, so that's why it doesn't match. Come back tomorrow when the new ones show up and continue on with coilovers at least, and then figure out measurements for axle shafts and how to mount it. Okay, I couldn't help myself. Put the diff in, and I mounted one of the shocks just because I wanted to see what it would look like. So now I'm going to go inside. I'll finish it all up tomorrow. Alright, it's the next day. Some things have happened since you saw this last night. You saw me put the little tabs down here on the lower control arms for the coilovers. I made this shock tower right here. It's welded on there. Welded some bolts on here so I can space these out if I want to, which I am going to. That's why I put such long bolts on it. I want to space it out a bit. And that was the easiest way I could think of to mount the coilovers on it. It is out of the way as far as I can tell for the axle shaft. I may have to move it later, and it does work. Obviously, once the truck's all put together, adjustments will have to be made. And before you ask, I know that is pretty tall. So yes, as it sits right there, it is hitting the body. But as you can see, that is at what I'm gonna call ride height right now. I don't want the wheel all the way up here. So the body is still going to get caught on the ground. Still gonna be about here. So I still have plenty of room to be able to mount everything in here. I also still have plenty of room to do a steering servo, because that's the next thing that I have to try and figure out is I got to figure out how to steer this thing. Okay, here's my steering. 2 nuts welded onto the face with some bolts welded onto it. But if I turn this one, that one turns. And my plan is probably gonna have to move these nuts and make another one of these, because I didn't think things through very well. But have the servo mounted up here, servo horn down here, with it just swinging back and forth on a tab right here to bolt it together. Then technically that should be steering, and it all still works even with going up and down. Now I know there's simpler ways of creating something like this, or just buying it. I'm sure there's better ways of doing all this as well, but I think for a weekend's worth of work, I think that turned out pretty good. Everything works. I don't have the axle shafts jammed up, but everything works and independently. There's still a lot of tuning on this to get everything to work correctly, but I'm pretty happy with how it's turned out. So for the basis of the easier way of doing it, you can get this. So here's mine, and here's the one from Element. You can buy it just like this. It's got the frame right here. These are just stands. You take them off and then connect it to the frame. This is what would come with the Trail Runner as the RTR. I bought this as reference. I just wanted to see how it would work, and all of it is made out of plastic. I think it was like $100. So here's the biggest difference between this one and mine. If it doesn't fall over. Much wider track. Everything's made of metal, just like I prefer. And I made this. But for those of you out there that aren't able to do stuff like this kit is available for you. And the other thing I didn't like about it is how short the travel is. And mainly, it's all made of plastic. So like I said, there's still a lot of tweaking and tuning to do to get this contraption to work correctly. I still have to figure out the axle shafts, but it's getting late. We got work, so I'm gonna end it here. Thank you guys all for tuning in again, and we're gonna keep going with this. I may procrastinate on the whole axle shaft idea until I come up with something a little bit better and start building the rest of the frame that this will go onto for the rest of the truck. So from Waffles RC, we'll see you next week when we continue on getting this contraption to work and see how it all functions, if it even does. We won't know till we find out. See you next week.